All right, ladies and gentlemen, we were going to get started. I want to welcome you to our panel, Diverse Students in Higher Education, Access and Resources. My name is Sean Vereen. I'm an Associate Dean in the Undergraduate Admissions Office. Quick introductions. I know we're not supposed to do introductions, but maybe very quickly we'll do some introductions.
So I'm Gipson. I'm the Associate Vice Provost for Equity and Access in VPUL.
Good morning. My name is Ajay Nair. I'm the Associate Vice Provost for Student Affairs.
So we have a lot to tell you, and we will try to move very quickly. I want to also introduce Michelle Brown-Nevers, who's very nice to join us. She's an Associate Vice President who oversees the Registrar in the Financial Aid Office. She's going to be helping us out with questions and answers that you may have, questions that you may have about financial aid. So the format for today is I'm going to give a presentation talking about the admissions office and talking about the national context around our recruitment efforts around diverse populations. Ajay and Will talk about what's available to students on campus, and then also some pre-collegiate programs that are going on as well. We have a huge connection with Philadelphia, and Will can tell you about what we're doing on the pre-college front. So I have a slideshow. There are a lot of slides. I'm going to move through them very quickly to make sure that we have time, and then we will have questions and answers at the end. If you have financial aid questions, I'll say this again when we get to the question and answers, ask away so Michelle can have the rest of her weekend back. So let me talk a little bit about access as it pertains to admissions. Access, and we'll talk about what does access really mean. But obviously, you know, folks have been at the discussion in the morning, or President Gutman, there is a deep commitment here going back to Benjamin Franklin. Right? I mean, this is one of the first institutions in the Americas to have actual financial aid. You know, the president has been very clear, along with all kinds of offices across the institution, about why it's important to be able to serve folks. Penn is always going to be a highly selective place, but we want to be representative of the world around us. So I want to give you some context about what's been happening. The admissions rate, and this is to 2009, and I'll give you the 2010 figures as well. It's hard to get into Penn. Admit rate, you can see, you know, as late as 1991 was 47%. It is now down to 14 for last year's class. We had, as of 2009, 22,000 applications. Last year we had 27,000 applications. Our events across the country, we have been seeing very high attendance. I would guess that we'll be very close to 30,000 applications next year. So the landscape has become very competitive over the last 25 years. The rise of Penn and its reputation nationally and internationally, the efforts of the admissions office, the efforts of folks across campus have made Penn really a school of choice, and the reputation continues to increase. So that's a good thing, but there are a lot of things that are happening nationally that put pressure on us to figure out how we're going to recruit a diverse student body. Talk about the current demographics of the United States. We talk about the changing demographics. You know, right now you're close to 30% Black and Latino, and then, you know, over 30% including Asians, so that population change is happening. We talk about this time by 2050 when there will be no majority population in the United States. Right? It's a really unprecedented thing happening in U.S. history. So we talk about that time at mid-century when minority populations will not be minorities anymore and there will be no majority population. But that's happening among high school graduates now. So rather than just thinking about what's going to happen by mid-century, diversifying of the high school graduates is happening right now. By the 2020s, there will be no majority population. Thinking about where students actually are. So half of Penn's applicant pool is from Maine to Virginia. Our biggest single state is California. But the places where there will be growth in high school graduates, high school age students, are really going to be in the South and in the West. You know, Northeast is a big pull for us, and those student populations will be staying flat or declining. Now, we keep having more and more applications because there are these students who keep applying to more and more schools. In our applicant pool, there are probably an average. An applicant is applying to 10 institutions, right? And that may be continuing to increase. But the number of high school students is starting to level off. It's been growing for a long period of time, but regionally, it's going to be growing in the South and the West. So when we look at those population projections in the South and the West around race, it's happening actually right now. In the South, there'll be no majority population 2 or 3 years from now. So places where we're going to be recruiting from in the future, that diversification's been happening actually very quickly. But then when you look at who's actually receiving bachelor degrees by race, you can see that there are severe racial disparities. And we will talk about across wealth and race and class about how these things play out and how they affect higher education. Again, just to kind of hit you over the head a little bit about where the growth is, most of this growth is going to be in the Latino population, exploding really across the country, but particularly in the South and the West. So what has been happening at Penn? Penn has been diversifying over the last 20 years, over the last 50 years, really. And that diversity is happening. Is it happening as quickly as we want? Perhaps not, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Right now, in 2010, we had 218 black students. It's the second highest number of black freshmen in the freshman class in the history of the institution. We had 206 Latinos. That is the highest number in the history of the institution. You can see the growth from 1990 has been significant and real. Native American population, again, that's the highest number that we have had, but not necessarily high enough. Giving you an idea of the Ivy Plus group, we are talking about a small segment of the population, and we'll talk about what that means for us. The Ivy Plus is the Ivy League plus MIT and Stanford. There are some 72,000 students in that population. 5,500 of them are Hispanic, 5,200 of them are black. All right? So even 40 years of affirmative action have left us at a very significant place, much further than we have ever been, right? But at the same time, there is a lot of work to do. Looking at the overall student body, so not just the freshman class, you can see here, again, 7.83 African American, 6.43 Hispanic, Native American at 0.49. So again, diversifying the student body, but really we're at half of where the high school population is today. So the growth rate has been increasing of underrepresented minority populations, Latino, African American, and Native American, at about 2.88%. Right? It'll take us another 17 years to get to where we are now in the high school population around diversity. It will take us another 30 years at this pace. Right? So another issue for us on the access front is to try to make sure that we move faster. Talk a little about income. I love this slide. The United States is a really rich place. This is state economies compared to country economies. All right? So if you look at, my favorite one is Hawaii, right? It has the economy the size of Nigeria, which is a country of 100 million people. We talked a couple of months ago about China passing Japan as the second largest economy in the world. I think they have now a almost $2 trillion economy. Ours is 14. All right, so this is a very rich country, no doubt, right? But income and wealth are distributed unequally, and in particularly over the last 25 years. So this shows you the top 0.1% of earners and what they have been earning over the last, since 1947 to 2003. In 1947, they earned 22 times more than the bottom 90%. Now it is 77 times, right? We talk about the income growth, right? So there's been a lot of money made over the last 25 years. If you see the share of income growth that's happened to the top 10%, right? They have made 90% of the income growth over the last 20-year period. We know that wealth is distributed unequally across race. You can see the poverty levels among blacks and Latinos are significantly higher than Asians and whites, and then the overall rate as well. You can also see distribution of wealth, right? And so we talk a lot about income in the United States, and income, has become better, but again, we can see disparities there. Wealth is pretty unbelievable. I mean, if you're looking at the top 1% and the top 9%, right? They own pretty much 80% of the wealth, right? So all your money beyond income, right? So your house, your stocks, bonds, things like that, right? So wealth is in the hands of very few people. Just to kind of, again, hit you over the head a little bit about it, distribution of wealth has also become more unequal over time. You see that bottom 80%, which is the vast majority of the population, holding very little of the assets. When you're looking at families who actually have stock market stocks in the stock market, very few families across the country actually do. Very few families actually have the money to sustain themselves in retirement. So again, it's a very wealthy country, but we have to think very hard about how wealth is distributed. Again, talking a little bit about wealth and race. This is a hard slide to look at, but I kind of want to bring your attention to two things. If we go to 2004, up there at the top, we can look at the difference between black and white around wealth. And if you look at average wealth there in 2004, $100,000 an average black family has, over $500,000 for an average white family. Now, of course, if you look at the averages versus the median, right? So the median is really where half of everyone's above and half of everyone is below. So Oprah is throwing off the averages a little bit. So if you look here at the actual median, right? So half of black families in the United States have assets and wealth of $11,000 or less. If you look at the ratios, right, and so you look at the ratios over time, they've actually changed very little. People are making more money, but the disparities have changed very little. If you look at folks with zero or negative net wealth, right, 29%, right, of black families have no wealth or negative wealth. So we have made much progress around income, but we know that wealth remains a huge disparity. Talking about costs, so we'll kind of bring it back to higher education. I mean, we can see even with our very generous financial aid programs, a lot of push around access over the last 10 years in particular, low-income families are spending a significant proportion of their income on education. And this is changing, and if you can see, again, with those wealth disparities, you can see that there are other folks who have the money to be able to pay for college, and it has less of an impact on them. So you look at schools like Penn, and we look at the socioeconomic diversity, and one of the reasons why the president has been so clear about the necessity of diversifying around not just culture and race, but around income. If you see in 1988, these numbers are not adjusted for inflation, but I'll kind of give you a context about why they're still relevant. So 69% of students at highly selective institutions were making $100,000 or less. That number is now 35%. Now, there was an income range that did not exist in 1988. That was $200,000 or more. That is now 33%, and numbers at Penn are similar. When we look at the number of high school graduates coming from families that actually make over $100,000, that's 15% of the high school graduate population. So there are severe disparities across the board. If we look at where high-income folks are and what kind of schools they're at, the top 25% make up 74% of the population at top universities. If you look at community college, you see a more equal distribution across the board, right? So the highly selective institutions are places where we have an overrepresentation of high-income earners. Talk a little bit about the SAT. And again, I know this is a lot of information, but it's important stuff, so we'll kind of run through this as quickly as we can. So we also, SAT numbers, if you were to look at a graph of SAT numbers at Penn, they have been increasing exponentially. We're at probably 2,400 points. There are 3 sections to the SAT now. We are probably in the 720 range on all 3 sections, all right? So we have some really high testing students. But when we look at, by race, about folks who are scoring highly on the SAT, we have 6,800 African Americans who scored over 1,200, so scoring on the critical reading and on the math section, all right? 6,800, right? We have 15,000 Latinos. There were over 100,000 Latinos, over 100,000 African Americans that took the SAT test. Now, that doesn't mean that there are only 6,800 smart black people in the United States, right? So one of the pressures of us wanting to make sure that we have a very competitive and selective student body is about the impact that the SAT has racially as well as around socioeconomics. We see the differences on income class and scores. You can see folks making less than $220,000 scoring almost 100 plus points lower than those higher on the income scale. So again, as the SAT is an important component of our evaluation, we look at many different things, SAT being one of them. But it is something that we are rated on by things like the U.S. News and World Report. So again, we see that there are disparities when we look at race and class. Just to give you that context, there are a group of students who are scoring highly from low-income groups that are not going to highly selective institutions. We have a number here, 62,000. There are 20 or 30,000 kids who really have high scores that are just not applying. And one of the challenges for us is to try to pull them into the pool. So what are the implications of all of this? So people will talk about disparities in the United States and say that's okay because you will be able to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and move, right? And social mobility. We can see here compared to other countries, actually the social mobility. So this is a correlation between fathers and sons, right? So you make what your daddy made, right? Correlations are almost as high as here as the United Kingdom, one of the highest correlations, right? So if you're low income, if your father was low income, you will be low income, 50% chance of that, right? And that inequality and that social mobility, lack of social mobility, has actually been increasing. And we talk about other places that have more planned economies and that there is less social mobility there, and in actuality, it may be the exact opposite. We talk about mobility without a college degree. So if you don't have a college degree, you're more likely to be stuck where you were born. And you're more likely to stay in the high income classes with a college degree as well. So the college degree becomes a really important facet of social mobility. Some people will say institutions like Penn are highly selective and it's not meant for everyone. But one of the big issues that we do, right, is create leadership across the country. So we know that the college degree is very important, right? We also know that we create leaders. So here you'll see the number, right, of managers and professionals, still 78% white, right, after 40 years of affirmative action. We see, though, that really the 54% of corporate leaders and 42% of America's political leaders are coming from 12 institutions, this being one of them, right? So we know the importance of these places in creating a leadership group for this country. We can say state legislators by race, 87% white. We can look at Fortune 500 CEOs, right? And I think this is worth reading. 5 are black, 7 are Latino, 7 are Asian, 15 are women, right? So there is unfinished work to be done. So what are we doing? So we know a couple of different things. We know places like Penn, low income and underrepresented minorities are more likely to graduate from institutions that are more selective, that have enormous amount of resources to help students. One of the programs that we're doing is called the POSSE program. POSSE is a program started about 20 years ago that works in particular cities around with urban students, students in urban public schools. They work together. They pick, POSSEs are anywhere from 10 to 12. They pick these students. There's a pre-collegiate program that they do, and they prepare for college. And then they work together when they are at school. We did this in Miami. We had something like, we partnered with also Hamilton College as well as Mount Holyoke. We had 800 nominations last year from all the public schools in Miami. We picked 11 fantastic students, and there they are. We had over 945 nominations this year, and we're only going to be picking 11 students. But these programs pull in students from across Miami public schools. These are students coming from high schools that we usually don't get applicants from, that we usually don't admit from. They are fantastic students. Right? They are now in their first semester. They have a mentor on campus. I'm actually mentoring them. They are the future, right, of this institution. And that future just doesn't mean around diversity, around race, but around socioeconomics, around different walks of life, different issues and talents. You know, the challenge for us is to try to diversify the student body and hold on to the traditions and the selectivity and the rigor of this institution. All those things are possible, right? But we're trying to do a bunch of things. I will not go through everything on this slide in the case of time, but some very basic things. We are starting a pilot program in Philadelphia and LA and in New York with alum, trying to organize them to help us with access work. We are also working with other national partners. The Questbridge program helps us find low-income students. We are going to be working with the KIPP Foundation as well. KIPPs are a power public charter school movement. They have 70 schools across the country, 2 here in Philadelphia. This was started by a Penn alum in New York and in Houston. By 2014 or 2015, they will have 4,000 high school graduates. So we hope that they become a major pipeline for us. A Better Chance, which puts students into independent schools. We have the most, ABC is the nickname for the program. We have the most ABC scholars out of any college in the United States. We are partnering with them now and trying to reach out to students earlier. We are organizing folks on campus. The best people who sell this institution are our alum and our students. And so getting them more involved and engaged in the process overall. And then also trying to understand our indicators, trying to put things like the SAT, high school transcript, our admissions practices into context, understanding how they work to make sure that we're not excluding students who will be fantastic. Real issue for us is that are we missing out, right? With the disparities that we see in the system, are we missing on folks who would do really well here, right, but haven't been given the access to the education? And so that's one of the big things that we're looking for. I know that that's a lot of information, and I thank you for listening, and I'll hand it over to Will. Sure. Yeah.
Join me in giving Sean another hand for his presentation. It's a pleasure to have Sean and Ajay as colleagues in this work. I asked him to put this picture back up here, first of all, because they look better than I do, so you probably want to spend your time looking at them, but because they really represent what it is we're talking about. It's not some abstract ideas or some ideals that we feel we cannot aspire to. We can actually do this, and we're doing this here at Penn. So what I'd like to do, and my colleague Ajay will come and say more about it, is to address the issue of what happens once these students who, have arrived here at Penn. And I want to talk a little bit about the area I'm responsible for in the Office of the Vice Provost for University Life, but it's connected to every area of the university that has to do with really ensuring that to the best of our ability, we're making sure these students have a quality experience here at Penn, this new face of the University of Pennsylvania. So what I want to share with you, first of all, is what we're doing once the students arrive, and then talk to you just a little bit about the pre-baccalaureate programs that we are involved with. I want to say to you that the Department of Equity and Access is really a new iteration of a former kind of organization of the Vice Provost University Life area having to do with these particular issues. So in the fall of '07, the position I now hold was created, and I came to the position in January '08. One of the real markers of how the institution is refocusing its efforts around equity is that this department and my position is such that the emphasis is on partnership and coordination with other entities and offices on campus, not restricted to VPUL, but across the university. So the Vice Provost for Education convenes a group of faculty called the Faculty Council on Access and Achievement. This group of faculty members who represent a variety of disciplines across the university have been meeting since February '08 to look at issues related to graduation rates, into questions about retention. They've paid a lot of attention to what are referred to as gateway courses and try to get a better understanding of how we as a university, but especially in the classroom setting, provide the best opportunities for these extraordinarily bright students to do exceedingly well here at the University of Pennsylvania. So I can tell you right away, the University of Pennsylvania of today does not have a retention problem per se, but we do have some issues around what we would call the gateway courses. We want to understand better why it is that some students don't do as well as we would expect in the gateway courses. And in fact, there have been some responses to that concern. Just this fall semester, Econ 001 and 003 have offered an opportunity for students outside of those courses to really meet on a regular basis in study groups to address real-world economic questions and concerns. What I want to emphasize is that this is not a remedial opportunity. This is really about introducing the young people to the field of economics. So when they go to these sessions, they go to really engage with faculty and TAs who, for whom this is their life's work. 300 students in all are signed up in these courses. We were expecting about 100 might sign up for this special study group. 285 signed up. So this is just one way the university on the academic side of the house with the faculty council is trying to address some of these issues. I want to underscore the Penn of today does not necessarily have a retention problem, but we do have issues we have to pay attention to. In addition, I want to share with you that Sean and I and Ajay in many ways are involved in efforts to really pay attention to these students who represent the new face of the University of Pennsylvania. We're part of an administrators group called Penn Pathways. We're a group that's really invisible to the students. What we do is meet on a regular basis to look at how well these students are doing, say in the Posse cohort, which is new, those who came to us through the Quest Bridge locator last year for the first time, and to understand better how the university can help these students reach their aspirations. What we're hoping is that these students will become the primary users of Penn resources. In my thinking, the smartest people in the world are the people who know where to go and when they need help. And so this is, in many ways, my definition of what Penn Pathways is about. We want to really encourage these young people to use all of the Penn resources. When I referred at the top of my comment to partners across the university, I'm talking about college houses and academic services, the house dean, the faculty, masters, the RAs and the GAs. I'm referring to the Wine Garden Learning Resource Center. I'm referring to counseling and psychological services. I'm referring to the writing program. Anywhere and in any way that we appreciate the holistic reality of a student, and in our efforts to do the best that we can that they achieve their educational aspirations, that's what we're about with Penn Pathways. The other thing I will say about this equity piece is students here at Penn, if you didn't know it, are not shy at all. They ask questions, whether they are convenient questions or inconvenient questions. And I'm really grateful to work at a university where, by and large, the senior administration is not afraid of the questions that come from our students. So as a result of student prodding and pushing, in the spring of '09, Penn administered something called the Pulse. Pulse is the Perception of Undergraduate Life and Student Experience Survey. It was a survey that Penn participated in with some other selective institutions, where questions were asked about a number of components of college and university life, at the undergraduate level, and it also asks questions about community. As a result of that survey, which we received in the fall of '09, this fall we will start focus groups to really drill down into questions about why some students say, I feel respected in my community. But when you ask them broadly about the university, some of them say, they responded in a way, more properly, that raises concern for us. So we are going to run focus groups. My point in bringing this up to you is to say, this university and this administration, the Office of the Vice Provost for University Life, the Provost, the President, and across the board are as attentive as possible to student concerns and making sure that the new face of Penn finds a place and a home at the University of Pennsylvania. Now I want to tell you about some of the cultural centers. I know there's a wide range of alumni classes here. For some of you, perhaps when you graduated from Penn, the only cultural resource center might have been the Greenfield Intercultural Center, or perhaps the LGBT Center when it was in a very small place in the center of campus, and perhaps the Women's Center. Since 1999, between 1999 and 2000, other cultural resource centers were established on the University of Pennsylvania campus. They're in McCool, the Black Student Cultural Center. They are La Casa Latina, the Center for Hispanic Excellence, and Patch, the Pan Asian American Community House that my colleague Ajay in his other Penn life was director of. and these centers are now celebrating their 10th year anniversaries. Our students are incredibly engaged with them. When Ajay comes, he'll talk a little bit more about what that means, but what I want to say to you is that these students, in addition to their college house placements, those especially who are freshmen and many of the sophomores, they find their places at Penn. And as a young person said to me years ago when I came to Penn in '96, we were having a heart-to-heart conversation, and his question to me, and I'll never forget this, is, can I be black and complicated? And I love that statement because he was trying to understand what it meant to be a black man at Penn's campus, but he understood himself to be so much more than that as well. So I'm sure Ajay will address that. And finally, this is where I get to do a little show and tell. We have some invitations that we want to share with you. Do you have them? And I want to talk about one of our outreach programs. This is a summer mentorship program. This is for Philadelphia public and charter school students. The idea is to ride on the coattails of what Sean was sharing with you. We need more students at Penn. We want more students at Penn who do not fit what has been the historical kind of profile of a Penn student. That is to say, they don't necessarily come from wealthy families. They don't come from independent private schools. They're Philadelphia public and charter schools. And what we do in this program is a 4-week non-residential program where the students come on campus and they get introduced to different career fields. I want to tell you the names of the participating Penn schools in this summer mentorship program, which was founded by former Provost Ron Daniels, who's president of Hopkins now, and the late Dr. Burnett Johnston, some of you might remember at the medical school. And the participating schools are medicine, law, engineering, dental, and nursing. These young people who are rising juniors and seniors come on campus, they get introduced to these career fields, they get incredible exposure to what it might mean to be an X, whatever, a nurse or a doctor. And then what we've been trying to do as well is to get some of these students who might not have ever imagined it, that they might want to put in an application for admission to Penn for undergraduate studies. As my colleague Sean Vereen says, we have a credibility problem there. Some families just don't believe that provisions will be made at Penn for them if they are admitted. And that's what we're working so hard to do. And this is just one of the programs that we use to try to do this. Currently, Sean, the numbers I have is that 5 SMP students are now currently enrolled at the University of Pennsylvania. We're very proud of that. Finally, I will say this. We are the only Ivy League school, I have to say this, even though Val's not here, this is being recorded, so I'd better say it. Dr. Valerie Swain-Cade McCullum is the Vice Provost for University of Life, and we're the only Ivy League school that has all of the federal TRIO programs. And for us, that means classic upward bound math and science, talent search, and we have the Nair Scholars Program, as well as student support services. My point to you is that we're doing all that we can to ensure that the new face of Penn finds its place here at Penn and does exceedingly well. And also, we are trying to cultivate that next generation of students that can become part of the pool from which selections are made for admission to the University of Pennsylvania. Thank you.
Good morning and welcome. I've had at least one of you in class before, and there she goes. She knows I'm going to torture you for the next 5 minutes, right? So she made a quick exit. She's very smart. I like to say I have a unique perspective on Penn student life because of my position, but also because I live among 800 college students as a faculty fellow in Rhoden College House, what you may know as High Rise North. Every day for me is a window into the Penn student experience. Just last week, I came home and had to do a double take. My 5-year-old daughter was in a sea of college students practicing a cultural dance in a study lounge. Apparently, the students had come over to my apartment and asked if my daughter could come outside and play. So I made my way over to the study lounge where the students were playing, and the students explained, they're sophomores, they're juniors, and they're seniors. They thought it would be fun to learn a new dance, and they knew my 5-year-old daughter was a dance enthusiast. But as I looked closer at the group of students, I noticed that this traditional Indian dance they were performing was being performed by a very diverse group of students, not just Indian students. And to me, this is the beauty of Penn, perhaps the beauty of higher education. Spontaneous, sometimes unpredictable moments when a global, diverse world intersect to foster what I think is best described as polyculturalism. Despite the example that I shared, it's no secret that here at Penn, we are a community of many communities. In fact, we pride ourselves on having something for everyone. If you go to our Go Penn website, it's a new social networking site that we've created for student organizations, you'll find more than 700 student organizations registered. 700 student organizations registered there. Consider our Penn World Scholars, who are selected based on their exceptional leadership potential, their academic achievement, financial need, and career plans. They receive financial support throughout their time at Penn, and they're chosen from among a geographically, linguistically, and culturally diverse pool of applicants. Or our civic scholars, who serve, investigate, inform. They are our future change agents. Or even our fraternities and sororities, who have traditionally been thought of as insular. They participate in cultural diversity dialogue and training as part of their new member education. This is mandated by students, not administrators. Or from dance to spoken word, to jazz to stand-up comedy, from theater, a cappella, and more, performing arts at Penn is one of the most vibrant communities. We have more than 60 performances a year, and students explore and cross boundaries throughout the arts every single day. You may have heard as well that we were recently named the best gay-friendly school in the country. Right? This is the work of the LGBT Center and the Lambda Alliance and many, many others. I mean, I could go on with examples. But what I want to talk to you about today is what happens when these identities converge, when a polycultural experience is cultivated, when we recognize that we're living in a world where many cultures are converging at one time, that help us break out of this kind of dichotomous, boxed way of thinking, avoiding the binaries, the racial binaries, for instance, black, white, man, woman, right? Straight, gay. There's so much in between and across all of those boundaries. At Penn, we're starting to see the emergence of a transformed, vibrant, exciting community. You are familiar undoubtedly with Heyday and Spring Fling. Does that ring a bell? Okay. Well, there are lots of traditions at Penn, obviously, right? But today, tradition at Penn means something different, I think. At Penn, we now view tradition in a nuanced manner, recognizing that this term tradition holds real power and can help us transcend boundaries and transform the world around us. We're creating new opportunities here at Penn for the Penn identity. We're certainly looking forward, but we're also reminded of the past, but we're guided by our dreams, our hopes, and our ambition. These new traditions, these new identities start as early as new student orientation. Last year, led by our undergraduate assembly, and I should mention, we had a failed attempt 2 years ago. Administrators thought we'd run a cool party, right? And so we had flyers all across campus for an underground party, and I already told you what the problem is: underground, administrators, and cool. That just doesn't work very well, right? So our students recognized that we couldn't avoid some of the alcohol-related problems through our administrative initiatives, right, for our freshmen. And so our undergraduate assembly came in, and dozens of student groups, diverse student groups, that are seemingly disparate entities, collaborated to provide alternative, non-alcoholic events during the days of new student orientation. Or perhaps the academic theme year. This is the year of water here at Penn, where students gather in small groups and as a freshman class to discuss the big necessity, that is water and sanitation, for the Penn Reading Project. A space is created where their diverse lives and experiences intersect around a common theme. Another example of our polycultural community are our leadership programs. The Intercultural Leadership Program, for instance, brings together domestic and international students to explore leadership through a multicultural or global lens. Or Leadership Weekend, which some of you may have participated in, when campus student leaders from all across the campus create bonds and relationships that carry forward in their work. My point is that there was a time at Penn when certain groups were trying to move the margins closer to the center. Today, we're in the business of redefining what that center means. As my colleague Vijay Prasad from Trinity College reminds us, our goal then is to obliterate the assertion that people live only within these cultural boxes, or that culture is somehow pure and static, and that it is the work of people like us to somehow manage these cultural boxes and control these cultural boxes. Racial harmony sounds like a great goal, but I think our framework at Penn is far more progressive. Thanks to Sean's work, thanks to Will's work, thanks to the work of many members of our community. At Penn, this isn't simply about celebrating different cultures. In other words, you respect my culture and I'll respect yours. It's about every member of our community. It's about social justice. It's about learning, and it's about growth. This, to me, is the stuff of excellence to eminence. Thank you very much.
All right. Maybe another hand for Will and Ajay. It was very good presentations.